Yeah. Am I on? There we go.
Hello?
Hello.
When I first talked into it, it didn't know.
All right. Well, I can tell that everybody's happy and enjoying the sunshine that's coming out. But as Amy and I we were just talking, we enjoyed the rain too, though, to get rid of the pollen. And
I was going to say, are you going to pray for rain or some more?
no, I really found out why I was wearing the mask now for the pollen.
There you go.
You know, when all this stuff started, and we started wearing masks, we had some masks, but always wore those masks when I was doing the yard or something. And be glad when we get back to that. And again, we're thankful that we have this vaccine and hope everybody's moving towards that. Again, we're just happy for this beautiful day, for our day of worship, and for our opportunity this morning for Bible study. And then as we look forward to our worship today and to remember that greatest gift that makes all this possible. And we're grateful for that. Of course, we're continuing our study in Joshua. And just a reminder that next Sunday that Brother Gary Jones will be with us through Bible study and for worship. And we're so happy to welcome Gary and have his report about the work in India. Gary has done a great job in India. It's very tough in India. The political situation has been very tough for the church. The church has basically been persecuted. And we read about in the Bible about being persecuted. It is still occurring in India there. And so we certainly want to keep that work in our prayers and as we look forward to Gary being here. And also, as many of you know, Gary was a minister here at one time, and let's remember our 50th anniversary that we're celebrating this year for this church family, and remembering those who got this church family started, and that's scheduled for the 21st. Also remember next Sunday that it is also the third Sunday, and so with Gary being here, we will also have a lunch on that. Is that just covered dish or what, or just bring whatever on that? So let's keep that in mind. Of course, we want to remember our sick and those who need prayers. Do we have anything that has just come up that we're not aware of? Bobby?
Don't forget Jerry Shepherd.
Yeah. Really. How about Jerry?
He's doing okay. As long as he's eating, he's okay. They couldn't do the test today, so they're going to hopefully get what they need done tomorrow.
Okay.
But he's doing okay. He's back to kind of normal. So.
Well said. Yeah, we do want to remember Jerry, and as I said, thought he was having a heart attack, but again, they're still, as Dottie said, they're doing tests and so forth. So let's keep Dottie in our prayers too there. And also let's keep Dottie again. Celebrating churches when it's started in the 50 years is a great thing, and Dottie is that if she's asked you to do something, you do it now as we look forward to that. So a lot of good things going to be here in September. Hopefully that we won't be worrying that much about this COVID there, so we can celebrate. All right. Again, we're so Amy.
Jillian got engaged on her vacation.
Well, hello there. You want to introduce?
This is Corey. Hi, Corey.
Hey, Corey. I was so happy.
We got another distinguished visitor back here that I brought in. That's Sean.
Sean, glad to have you, brother. Well, that's great just to welcome our visitors and families. It's been very good for this church family, and we're so grateful for that. Join me in prayer as we get ready for our lesson this morning. Father, again, we're just so thankful for this church family, and as we come together this morning to be encouraged by your word and to be encouraged by one another, we're so grateful for that. And help us to be mindful where we can reach out, knowing that you work through us. We're so grateful, Father, for your word to guide us, for the gift of your Son, and the hope that we have. And as we look forward to our worship today, to remember him and his death, burial, and resurrection. In his name we pray. Amen. All right, folks, let's look. We kind of want to go back and kind of look at chapter 14. And again, we've pretty much have taken over the promised land now. Of course, there's still land to be conquered and so forth, but basically the northern and the southern campaigns, or actually started in the south first, the southern campaign and the northern campaigns have been completed. And so here we begin to, in chapter 14, we begin to talk about having fun. There we go. Love maps. And again, this is what we're going to be looking at. We've taken over the promised land, they crossed the River Jordan. We talked about that a lot of this area here was actually taken during Moses' time, as they were camped down here and then moved on up, and Moses died in this particular area here. But this is the way that we're looking at over these next few chapters, the way the promised land has been divided out. On the east side, which your scriptures may call Transjordan, but it's on the east, and then on the west side then, and basically then this is the Israeli part now. So these are the areas that we'll be looking at and referring to today. Any questions on the map? Ron?
Just keep in mind that the people of Ammon and the people of Moab are close kin to the Hebrews.
Yes. Ammon and Moab there in those areas. And you know, later on as we read, and even after we get out of Joshua in the scriptures, it talks about a lot of these tribes and these different people are mentioned many more times there. But Judah, very significant, which we talk about, Simeon, Benjamin, Dan, Ephraim. Who is Ephraim?
Joseph's son.
All right, Joseph's son. Who's West Manasseh and East Manasseh? That's the other son. And they got both sides, and we'll be looking and talking about that, and then the other tribes. As we looked at the current map, this area here now, we're looking at Jordan and Syria that has this side now. And then, of course, this area here with the difficulties that they have now. Need to move, please. Okay. In chapter 14, we look at here, and again, we talk about here in chapter 14, really it kind of goes over the general method that was taken to divide the land. And what was that method? By lots. And as I read the scriptures and we read the different things, I'm not exactly sure how they determined those lots. We was playing a game yesterday at my son's house with Mason, and we rolled the dice a lot. I'm not sure if we were rolling the lots or not on that particular situation there. But because we know that there were some, like Judah, got a better shot. He got a better lot. Now, how he got the better lot, there, I don't know if they were.
He drew the longest stick.
He drew the longest one. But, so anyway, those were the, that's the way they started dividing it out there. Now, Hebron was given to Caleb, born a slave, a companion of Joshua. And of course, we see, and who are the two men they're talking about here? Joshua and Caleb. Remember, Moses sent them in, and the story that we've been told over and over, Moses sent in, I believe there was 12 spies, weren't there? And Moses, Joshua and Caleb were the only ones who brought back favorable reports. And then that's where Moses said how to treat Caleb and to give him that advantage that he had. So again, Caleb found the fountain of youth there. And that's what we all want to look at. Let's look at verse 11. See, Caleb says in verse 11, "As yet I am strong this day, as on the day that Moses sent me. Just as my strength was then, so now my strength is for war, both for going out and coming in." Now that's pretty good there, because how old was he? 85. I'll be 84 next month. I'm not sure I can make that statement exactly like that or not. But that's a pretty good statement there for how strong that he is. And so we need to find the fountain of youth. We're always looking for the fountain of youth there. And I remember as a little boy living down in Brunswick, Georgia, and remember reading, where did they look for the fountain of youth in Florida? St. Augustine. I never found it there. Found some fun places to play, but never found the fountain of youth there. But so Caleb found that fountain of youth, and so he was treated very well there. So there in chapter 14 then, where he had the promise and Caleb inherits Hebron there, and one of the things in chapter 14, and we'll look at 15 and 17 in a minute, look at verse 15. "And the name of the Hebron family formerly was Kirja Arba. Arba was the greatest man among the Anakim. Then the land had rest from the war." So this kind of concluded then the northern and the southern campaign. How they started beginning to divide out this land after the southern campaign. And where did they go to rest then? Where was their camp? Gilgal. So they brought all the people came back in, the warring folks and so forth there, and so they came back into Gilgal. So here in chapters 15 and 17, and this just kind of gives, then we'll look at each chapter, but here it just talks briefly about it. Again, the book of Joshua next describes the land allotment for the tribe of Judah. As we were looking at the map a while ago, what kind of allotment did Judah get? Do you remember from the map? And we'll look at it again. Was it small, large, medium? It was large. And as we read in the scriptures, I've got exactly where, pretty choice land, in kind of in the south part there. So chapter 15 then describes Judah, and he had a precedent there, because he was one of the select sons from the 12. So again, we talk about Caleb's daughter request and received a parcel of land. So Caleb had, was Caleb an Israelite? Canaanite. So Caleb was not. As it pointed out there, he was originally a slave and then became there. And so, so Caleb, with the work that he did and with the spying out, and then even his family was treated well. So we can read about that in those chapters. Then chapter 16 details the allotment of land for the tribe of Ephraim. We said a while ago, who is Ephraim? A son of Joseph. And so again, chapter 17 covers the allotment of land for the half tribe of Manasseh that settled on the west side of the Jordan River. Now on the east side, the Jordan River, we have one part of the Manasseh tribe. So when the people of Ephraim and Manasseh complained about their allotment of land, Joshua told them to go clear some forested land and to settle there. So Ephraim and Manasseh, after already having pretty good choices, they still complained about what they had. So Joshua gave them more, but you got to go in there and clear it. And we know that's true in most everything. Now, one of the things that in traveling in Israel and in that area, one thing for sure, they cleared it. You don't see a lot of forested areas in Israel, and that's true in a lot of countries. They did not replant or go back to certain things there. But so, anyways, if you want more, go clear it out and get more. Is basically what he told him. Okay, in Joshua 15, it talks about what were the main borderlands of Judah. And it covers those in Joshua 15, 1 through 12, talks about those. The border of Edom and the wilderness of Zin southward. I don't know how far away I am. We'll look at it again on the map in a few minutes there. And so again, we see it talks about those borders there. And the land was not completely conquered. And again, as I said, they had to, as they went back and rested from the war, and then as they started making the lot of tribe of children of Judah. And then in those chapters, verse 1 talks about where those borders started. The southern border began at the shore of the Salt Sea, or we call it the Dead Sea. And then we could look at all of that. Then it went to the southward side of Arabah, passed along to Zin, ascended on the south side. And so you can read all those things. It kind of gets boring there with it. But again, as we'll look again in a few minutes, is that Judah was a pretty large territory that was given to them. And so that pretty well covers a lot of the rest of those verses, talks about that, the borders of Judah. Talks about the main city lands of Judah. What did the children of Judah fail to accomplish? The what? Jebusites. And again, we find that to be true in so many of the different tribes there. They still did not get a lot of the people out. And then later on, as we go on into the scriptures, we see that a lot of that difficulty. Some of them they got along with very well. Then later on, that's where a lot of the difficulties and the wars and so forth that came from. One of the things that's reading is that when it starts talking about all these chapters, that if you're going to read about how they divide them up, some when they talk about the territory, they'll give boundaries. Some, when they talk about the territory, they'll just name the cities. Or in some, they may just give the boundaries and not mention cities. So the description of these boundaries kind of vary as you read the different, in the different chapters there. So again, failed to send them out there. Anything else that we might have missed there in chapter 15? Again, basically talking about Judah and how it was divided up there.
I got a question. I know later on it was divided. Was that just Judah territory being divided to the northern territory and the south territory?
That when Judah was divided?
Yeah, when Judah was divided. That was later on, I know.
I don't remember that, y'all.
I think he's talking about the time of the kings when the northern tribe of Israel.
Oh, okay, yeah, with the kings there.
Yeah, that's later on,
Okay,
yeah. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, well, a lot of things happened to these tribes later on, as we'll read there for sure. Yeah, good point, thank you. Okay, and Joshua 16, what did the Ephraimites fail to accomplish? They didn't get them out either. So again, all of these, it was not too different from all these tribes, is to take them out. And that's one of the first things that God, Moses, and them told. And you know, when they first started out in those battles, they were wiping these cities out. But then later on, it began to change in that particular situation there. So again, in chapter 16, the lot fell to the children of Joseph from the Jordan by Jericho to the waters of Jericho on the east, to the wilderness that goes from Jericho through the mountains of Bethel, then down out from Bethel to Luz, passed along to the border of Archedes, Aratuth, and went down westward to the boundary of the Jephrites, as far as the boundary of Lower Beth Horon and Gezer. Again, we get to a map here again and to look at these we talked about. So Manasseh and Ephraim, they took their inheritance. Their land was given to them there. And then as we read on in chapter 16, verses 5 through 19, that talks about the land of Ephraim and the borders and so forth there. And in verse 10, answers number 8 there, Joshua 16, and they did not drive out the Canaanites who dwelled in Gezer, but the Canaanites dwelled among the Ephraimites to this day and became forced laborers. We know that happened on several occasions there. And they didn't drive them out, but they ended up being forced laborers there. So that's interesting situations too that occurs. All right, here we go. We can kind of look what we've been talking about. Here we can see Judah, and it had pretty much the southern part. And here we'll read it in a few minutes. And here's Simeon sitting right here in the middle of it. Then later on, Benjamin in this area. And then these other tribes. And we've already talked about Ephraim and Manasseh. They were kind of had the choice with it. Then we'll talk about how these others were divided up. So all these things that we've been reading, Judah talked about these boundaries from the Salt Sea or the Dead Sea all the way to the Great Sea, and then even down further south and up to this area here. And then it talked about Ephraim, its boundaries, and Manasseh. Here we see Manasseh had a pretty good choice there in that area too. This area here, in these areas, probably a little better area. And Manasseh had some good property there too. And then these areas, all the way up to Asher. Any questions on the map? Anything we want to point out? Mary Ann, am I forgetting to point on this side? Remind me, I thought about that. Okay. Joshua 17. This talks about the other half of the Manasseh tribe here when it talks on the west side. Again, remember, this is east, Transjordan. All of this is west. Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea, heading west all the way across there. All right, Joshua 17. Again, what did the children of Manasseh fail to accomplish there? What did the rest of them fail to do? Look down to verse 13. And it happened when the children of Israel grew strong that they put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. So again, excuse me, Frank, number one.
They didn't drive the people out of the cities.
That's right. They still did, just as in other cases there, they did not drive them out there. So what great task did the descendants of Joseph have set before them?
Clear their own way, basically. They go in and clear their own way to be able to settle
Again,
the land.
Well, they did, and what did we talk about a while ago? I think that's what that question is. Let's see what else we might have had here. Let's go back. What great task did descendants of Joseph have set before them? I don't know whether they're referring to, I forgot the question here, I don't know whether they're referring to where, they wanted more property and they had to clear. And again, we talked about getting the Canaanites out and then putting them to work there. And again, so of course they all had a lot of challenges and things of that particular nature there. So southward it was, in verse 10, talks about southward it was Ephraim's, northward it was Manasseh, and the sea was its border. And that talks about, the borders of there. So again, verse 12, yet the children of Manasseh could not drive out the inhabitants of these cities. The Canaanites were determined to dwell in that land. And as it happened then, the children of Israel grew strong. They put the Canaanites to forced labor, but did not utterly drive them out. So that's one of the challenges that they had in that particular case there. And then the latter part of that, verses 14 through 17, again talks about the forest country. They were complaining they didn't have enough, as we talked about a while ago. And then verse 17 says, you are a great people, have great power. You shall not have only one lot, but the mountain country shall be yours. So they gave them more, but hey, you got to go in there and do something about it. And so, although it's wooded, you cut it down, and again, they will be able to take it over. So that's chapter 17. All right, chapters 18 and 19. We talk about the tabernacle being located at Shiloh, other tribe lands in the promised land. The second settlement done at Shiloh, where was the tabernacle meeting set up. Of course, we know it was set up in Shiloh there. Then we're talking about doing getting the rest of these tribes in. And how many men were sent back to the land to survey it, and why? Huh? 3 from each tribe. All right, so they're getting ready then to divide up the rest of the land then that we looked at there. And Joshua 18 gives us a good lesson as people, as Christians there. Let's look at chapter 18, verse 1. I'm going to read a little bit here. Verse 1. Now the whole congregation of the children of Israel assembled together at Shiloh and set up the tabernacle of meeting there. Now, what was in the tabernacle?
The holy place?
What? The Ark of the Covenant. This is the Ark there. And this is then the tabernacle. And this was set up in Shiloh, as you'll read on into Judges, and then later on till David set up in Jerusalem. And so we'll talk about that particular situation there. So again, they set up the tabernacle meeting there. The land was subdued before them. In other words, they had taken it over. But there remained among the children of Israel 7 tribes which had not yet received their inheritance. We've talked about Judah, we've talked about Ephraim, we've talked about West and East Manasseh, and of course the others on the Transjordan side there. Then Joshua said to the people of Israel, "How long will you neglect to go and possess the land which the Lord God of your fathers has given you?" What's he telling the people here in this case?
Go get it. Be busy, do what you're supposed to do, don't just sit there.
All right, they had become, one of the commentaries I read, had become complacent. They were living in Gilgal. Of course, for all these years, they've been living a very nomadic life anyway. So they were pretty happy now just established in Gilgal. And so really God was getting on to them, Joshua was getting on to them because of their complacency. You know, they were just as happy there now sitting in Gilgal. And that's one of the things we need to be careful about as Christians, is not getting complacent, is that we have challenges and work ahead of us there. So that's what Joshua was telling these people. How long are you going to neglect? And so we need to ask ourselves and check us out there too. So as Bobby told us in verse 4, it says, "Pick out from among you 3 men for each tribe, and I will send them. They shall rise and go through the land, survey it according to their inheritance, and come back to me." Now evidently there's somewhere in an inheritance that kind of tells, you know, what they're supposed to have and not have there, even though we're talking about dividing lots and things out. And so they'll go through, survey it. They shall divide it into 7 parts. Judah shall remain in their territory on the south. We've already looked and talked about how that was divided up. The house of Joseph will remain in the territory of the north, as we've talked about Ephraim and Manasseh, and they've already been given their situation too. You shall therefore survey the land in 7 parts. Bring the survey here to me, that I may cast lots for you here before the Lord of God. But the Levites have no part among you. Who are the Levites? They're the priesthood. And it talked about previous chapters and previous books about what the Levites were not. So the Levites do not have a territory that's assigned to them. Now they're going to have plenty of assignments here in a minute there. But the Levites have no part, verse 7 of 18, for the priesthood of the Lord is their inheritance. Gad, Reuben, and half the tribe of Manasseh have their tribe on the Jordan, on the east side there, the Transjordan side, which Moses, the servant of the Lord, gave them. So Moses had already made that particular thing there. So they sent the men out in verses 8 to to survey. Then they came back, verse 18, to cast the lots. Then verse 11 talks about the land of Benjamin, gives the different borders and so forth there for the land of Benjamin and all the particular areas there and all the cities in Benjamin there. So we talked about Benjamin was located between what two tribes? We'll look at the map in a minute, look at that. Talks about some of the better known cities of Benjamin, and then it lists some of the better known cities of Simeon there. Talks about the cities of Zebulun, Issachar, Asher, Naphtali, Dan, and then what was given to Joshua and what did he build. So I think that's very important then that as we look then at what was given to Joshua there. Does somebody have that verse handy there? What was given to Joshua? Let's see, I might have it here in a minute.
Chapter 19, verse 19.
Well, I thought that's where it was. I couldn't find it.
Is it 1950?
Yes, thank you. Okay, towards the end of the chapter there. Towards the end of the chapter 19 there. Verse 49, when they had made an end of dividing the land as an inheritance according to their borders, the children of Israel gave an inheritance among them to Joshua the son of Nun. According to the word of the Lord, they gave him the city which he asked for, Tenasserah, in the mountains of Ephraim, and he built the city and dwelt in it. These were the inheritances which Eleazar the priest, Joshua the son of Nun, and the head of the fathers of the tribes of Israel, divided his inheritance by a lot in Shiloh before the Lord, and the door of the tabernacle meeting. So they made an end to the dividing of the land there. So chapter 19 pretty well talks about to the end of dividing the land. And so here we see these areas here, and right in this area here then is where Joshua then had his property there. So this is the areas that they had divided up. Any comments on any of that? So in verse 18:10, we talked about Joshua assembled the Israelites at Shiloh, set up the tabernacle there. We've read pretty much all that. And then they cast the lots to change that. Again, we talked about complacency. It's very easy for us to have it to get into. And so, as we talked about, as Joshua scolded the people for just sitting there. He yearns for us to be diligent in seeking out and doing his will, and promises to empower us as we do so. So again, good lessons on not to be complacent there. They cast the lots, again, as we talked about and read. Benjamin first received the allotment, then the rest of these allotments to Simeon, Zebulun, Issachar, all of these others, as we can see. And then Joshua, as we just looked at, was allotted a city and a parcel. And so again, it was completed here in this chapter. And again, we have the map there. Here's Simeon sitting right here in the middle of Judah. And so as it was described, Benjamin and all the areas again as we've continued to look at. Okay, in Joshua 20, we talk about the cities of refuge. Joshua 21, the cities for the Levites. And in the 6 cities of refuge, and doing real quickly, I think most of us know that. What was the purpose of the cities of refuge? What was the purpose of the cities of refuge?
Safe haven, if you accidentally killed someone, because in those days there was a blood revenge that the family would have to kill you, no matter how you killed them. So in refuge, you could stay there until the high priest of that city died, and then go back to your own land and get past.
Okay, as we talked about there in Joshua 20, the cities of refuge there, and these people might be guilty of, I guess we'd call that manslaughter now today or something maybe, or accidental with it. But again, the other people wanted to take revenge, but they could not, and so they had the opportunity, as was told us there, to go to these cities of refuge then that were set up. And it talks about them where they could be set up. And then stay there until that high priest died. That's always a kind of an interesting one to me. You know, how long is that? How long before that high priest died that they would be there? That could be forever for a lot of the folks there with that particular case there. So again, interesting point there. Then it talks about these cities of refuge then. And how many cities of refuge were there? 6. And they were pretty well kind of divided, and we could point these out, but we were out of town there. 1, down here 2 and 3, 1, 2, 3 on those areas there. All right, we'll stop there. We'll review 20 and get into 21, and that'll be for a couple of weeks. Remember, next Sunday, Brother Gary Jones. Thank you for your comments.